The Kansas City Chiefs need to sit Patrick Mahomes. That more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today, as I am every Tuesday, by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox. On today's episode, I'm going to tell you why the Atlanta Falcons cannot be trusted, why the Minnesota Vikings look like they're on the path to the 1 seed, but we will start with this injury news in Kansas City. I do not think the Kansas City Chiefs should be playing Patrick Mahomes this week. Before we dive in, I do want to thank you for making the Locked On NFL podcast your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Lauren, Patrick Mahomes, ankle injury. I think if the Chiefs are smart, they sit him down for a few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, until he's 100%, you got to sit him down no matter what. But if he's healthy, maybe he should be out there.
Well, listen, if he's healthy, but it's hard to believe after watching him at the end of the game last week that he would be healthy, but we got the latest information on the Mahomes injury from my guy Chris Clark at Locked On Chiefs.
13-1 on the season, Matt. But it does look like they have a little bit of an injury concern with Patrick Mahomes right now.
Yeah, we'll see how severe it is. Obviously, the hit that he took that finally knocked him out of the game, it didn't look too good. He got bent like a pretzel. But then again, we've seen Mahomes do this plenty of times, and it's never as severe as you think. And I don't know if it's, we talk about him being double jointed and elastic. Andy Reid talked about how sometimes he's made out of rubber bands. I don't know if that plays into it or not, or it's the training, whatever it may be. But I don't get too excited with Mahomes on these injuries until it proves to be otherwise. And hopefully we'll know a little bit here. We might even learn more as we're recording the podcast. But I didn't necessarily see anything that would make me think, okay, well, this guy's not playing next week. I mean, I think, knowing Mahomes, he's definitely going to be trying to play next week.
And I think that's crazy. I think that is insane. Look, there is no way. You're right. If he's healthy, play him, of course. But what is the line of healthy? What, 80% healthy, 90% healthy? Because he's clearly not going to be 100% healthy after that injury at the end of the game last week. And really what comes into it for me is the schedule for the Chiefs. They play the Texans this week on Saturday. It's going to be a physical football game against a good front when the Chiefs' offensive line hasn't been good. You flash forward to Wednesday, just 5 days later, they got to play the Steelers in Pittsburgh on Christmas Day. That's a good defensive front that can really get after this offensive line. Then after that, the Chiefs don't play again all the way until January the 5th. I know that if they lose both those games, they risk giving up the 1 seed to the Buffalo Bills. But if Patrick Mahomes' injury turns out to be more long-term than just a couple of weeks, then that ruins their season, not just the 1 seed. So I would risk the 1 seed to make sure I have a healthy Mahomes. I would not play him in either of the next 2 games that they're going to play within 5 days of each other and give him until January to be fully healthy for the playoffs.
But don't you think there's something to the idea of him like being out there and rallying the team and showing like everybody that, hey, like we're not slowing down, we're not giving up, as opposed to like, all right, everybody knows we're kind of phoning it in for 2 weeks with Carson Wentz and ho-hum, and maybe they sort of, they get lazy a little bit and not form bad habits, but kind of get out of like, you got to have this like consistent winning way all the way through the playoffs. And if you put pause on that for a couple weeks, is it hard to kind of get back to being the full power machine that we've seen them be?
I think that's a fair criticism, and that's a fair concern. It's, you want to be playing your best football as you enter into the playoffs. But I think considering the situation, really considering that they're back-to-back champs and so many players on that team have gone through the process before, and I think with bringing them back for the Broncos game, even if you lose those 2 games and you end up losing the 1 seed to Buffalo, you get them back for the Broncos game. You're going to have opening round playoff game at home against who? The Chargers, the Broncos, one of those teams. That's realistically what we're looking at right now. And I just don't believe that the Chiefs are really in danger of losing that game to one of those teams. I think that because they're division opponents, they would do even better. So for me, you look at what the worst possible path for the Chiefs could be if they sit them for 2 weeks, and it's that. And I'm willing to take that risk, I guess, because the other side, again, is Patrick Mahomes maybe not being close to healthy for an entire playoff run. And I think that's a bigger detriment than like a loss in momentum.
What about the home field advantage side of things? I mean, AFC Championship game in Buffalo versus AFC Championship game in Kansas City. Like, not to be too presumptuous there, but like Buffalo, especially, or maybe that or what Pittsburgh. Like, those are really tough places to play on the road in January, as opposed to, not that Kansas City is balmy that time of year, but it's there's a little bit. You don't need the fans shoveling out the sections of the stands in Kansas City. I can't help but feel like, man, maybe if you want to go back, if you need, everything's going to be in your way to try and repeat again as a Super Bowl champion, and home field advantage sure could grease that path a lot easier.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard enough to win 3 championships straight in the NFL. It hasn't been done in the Super Bowl era. So, obviously that's one of the most difficult thing to do in the modern NFL. I mean, my parents' lifetime even. But I guess it depends on what you think the Chiefs' odds are to beat Buffalo in Buffalo. I know they lost to them earlier this year, but 3 straight regular seasons they've lost to Buffalo, and they beat them in the playoffs, and not always in Kansas City. So if you were, I guess from your perspective, do you think right now, if you knew that Kansas City would be playing in Buffalo for the AFC Championship, would you be thinking that Buffalo would win that game?
Yeah, I guess, I think back to last year, and the divisional game was against Buffalo in Buffalo, and they won, and then they went on the road in Baltimore as well in that game. So, like, clearly they have it in them, and maybe the difference there is a fully healthy Patrick Mahomes versus Patrick Mahomes with a lingering injury that,
right.
Yeah, okay, would you rather be at home but less than 100% or on the road at 100%? And, you're
How does
talking
that even out?
On the road at 100% or as close to whatever 100% can be.
See, and that's the question. But for me, like, I guess this is why I'm the madman, Lauren. I've clearly drawn my line right now. I say 100% healthy Patrick Mahomes on the road, in the desert, wherever you want to play it. If Patrick Mahomes is 100% healthy, I still have the Chiefs as my favorite in the AFC. And I would rather take the risk of losing that home field to make sure that Mahomes is completely healthy than the other way around. So really, it's just the line in the sand of, if he's 80% healthy, would you play him? 90%? Like, what the percent would be? Because we know he's not going to be 100% healthy. There's just no way.
Well, and maybe the overlooked factor here is that, like, the Texans are struggling a little bit. And could Carson Wentz come in and beat the Houston Texans? I mean, we assume no 1 seed, but, like,
right,
out of the question with Wentz.
And you talk about the effect it could have on the team. I think that could have an even bolstering effect on the team. Like, hey, we're all so good here. Everyone's been on our case all year long. No, we can go out and win even without Patrick Mahomes. And when we get him back, we're unstoppable. So I think it could work that way. Obviously, if they lose both, it could go the other way. There's always these risks. But even Pittsburgh, if George Pickens isn't going to play, that run game isn't consistent, like, the Chiefs could find a way to win that game in a brawl in Pittsburgh, like the Cowboys did earlier in the year. So, and Watt has an ankle injury. I think there are a lot of factors here. So I'll be curious to see what the Chiefs do this week. And then, 1 week is more likely than 2. But for me, I would be sitting them down for 2 weeks. But we did have 2 Monday Night Football games to go over. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, Game Time is the best place to buy tickets, period. Why? They have the best features in the industry. And look, it's the holiday season. It's all about togetherness. Well, get together with some of the other fans of your favorite team and catch your favorite team live on Game Time using Game Time Picks. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I bought football, basketball, baseball, concert tickets on Game Time, and they always deliver. Again, the best features. You get a panoramic view from your seat. You get all-in pricing if you toggle on the feature in the app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's game time. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Look, you can tackle the final couple of weeks here of the NFL season and get ready for the playoffs with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. I've really enjoyed betting these games live, looking at drive bets, the team going to punt, kick a field goal, a turnover, things like that throughout the games. Really, really fun feature that you have on FanDuel. And here's the thing. You get a hunch in the middle of the game. You can open the FanDuel Sportsbook app, check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Lauren, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Talked about why I think that Patrick Mahomes needs to sit down for a couple of weeks, but clearly it's debatable. Now, what isn't debatable is that the Minnesota Vikings destroyed the Chicago Bears. And look, Lauren, I don't mean to pour it on thick as our Chicago Bears expert. I know you didn't enjoy the game either, but looking at it from the Vikings perspective, I mean, they're just absolutely rolling. And at this point, if you have doubts about the Vikings, they really can't do much more to prevent you from having those doubts. And my guy Luke Braun continues to say, it is real.
Well, the Vikings are 12-2 after a very no-drama 30-12 was the ultimate score as a bunch of stuff happened in garbage time. But the Vikings are going to go to 12-2. They're now tied atop the NFC North, atop the NFC with the Lions and the Eagles. And things get pretty real from here. They got to go to Seattle. They got to play Green Bay. And then the big one in Detroit against the Lions. But they took care of business at home in their winter whiteout uniforms against Caleb Williams. Basically forced that offense into a totally turtled, terrible version of itself that couldn't really move the ball until things were so out of hand that they started, with soft coverages and stuff. Very similar to some of the early games this season, in particular week 1, the Giants game, even complete with a Dallas Turner sack, a beautiful Dallas Turner sack, which is also great. We got a whole bunch to talk about. I'm about to jump on the postcast, so go check that out at Locked On Minnesota Sports, and then I'll have Locked On Vikings up for you as soon as I can. See you there.
So, look, the schedule going down the road, Seahawks, Packers, Lions, that's going to be difficult, but they are tied with the Lions now. They can win back that tiebreaker in the final week of the season. I think they may have their hands full with Green Bay because they're playing hot right now as well. I don't know what it is, though, Lauren. I just have to be honest. I just can't believe. I see Sam Darnold, and look, I'm covering the Titans. We got Titans fans telling me that they want to go sign Sam Darnold, and I just see games like this. It's like the Vikings are so good around him that it doesn't matter that he just played okay. Like he has, some bad throws in there. The offense has some sputtering moments. They still get to 30 points, though, and it's like, what do you mean Sam Darnold didn't play great? They scored 30 points. They dominated the game. But you watch the games, and he's just okay. He's just okay. And I just feel like the machine in Minnesota is so well-oiled right now that it is making some people over-exaggerate how great Sam Darnold is playing. And at the end of the day, I just feel like that is going to catch up to him in a big moment. Like, I just see a round one big-time upset of the Vikings in this one, like we got a couple of years with Daniel Jones. And no matter what they do or how good the other parts are, I just can't help but feeling that way.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from there in the sense, and obviously it's easy for me as, just lost to the Vikings. Let's criticize them, right? But you look at they're on a 7-game winning streak right now. None of those teams are over 500.
Right.
I think the Cardinals are exactly 500, so they're really close.
Yeah.
But it took a fourth quarter comeback for the Vikings to win that game.
They did not play well. Yeah.
Overtime 4 weeks ago. It's not like they've been rolling all these bad teams. Obviously, it's hard to win 7 games in a row against anybody.
Yes.
Vikings are a good football team, but I tend to be with you there.
Absolutely.
Where I think Kevin O'Connell is good enough as an offensive play caller to carry Sam Darnold to maybe a playoff win or two, but like feels like when you get to that NFC Championship game, it's teams like this that are like weak at the quarterback position but great everywhere else that end up falling like just that amount short. And you're like, oh man, if they'd just been better at QB, if they had a true playmaker there, like, that would put this team over the top. And that feels like where the Vikings might be right now.
Well, it feels like what San Francisco has been for the last few years. It's like that's why they went out and tried to get Trey Lance, and then they settled back into the Brock Purdy, and then now we're having the debate of whether Brock Purdy should be paid because he's not a guy like what they were hoping Trey Lance would be. They still don't have that answer, and I'm with you in the sense of I think the Vikings are definitely good enough to win a playoff game. I'm not guaranteeing anything like that. Like they could even again win a couple. But I just something about it in me feels like in a big moment, you're right. They'll be searching for that extra gear, but they're a good team. And maybe it goes Nick Foles, you know what I mean? And Sam Darnold pulls it off. I think the Steelers kind of have some of that DNA in the AFC. They're like that team and they have really good defense, got good environmental stuff, but can you really trust it in a big moment? Inconsistent run games, in my opinion. So I'm with you there. I think we're kind of aligned on that. On the other side, I would be remiss to not ask about your Chicago Bears. From my outside perspective, not in the trenches every day, I think it's clear that they absolutely cannot bring Thomas Brown back. I was always leery of that, even as a possibility. They have just looked terrible, even worse, under him in the last couple of weeks. What I'm really concerned about is the Caleb Williams confidence factor. He definitely looked very upset. And, I hate to be rude, but even in college, he had some performative disappointment, in my opinion. And you just wonder about his confidence as a playmaker going forward. My question really is at this point, and I know you were telling me this is where the conversation is basically at for Bears fans. What kind of coach do the Bears need to bring in next to help Caleb Williams? Do you need that offensive guy, Lauren, or do you think they could go more of the CEO, Dan Campbell, Mike Vrabel type of guy?
They keep talking as though that's the direction they'd prefer to go.
Flavor of the week.
The leader of men is the phrase they keep throwing out there. But like these last two games of Caleb Williams have really been two of his worst all season. And I can't help but get this feeling like the three straight losses of Packers, Vikings, Lions, all at the last possible second in the final 5 seconds, like that feel like the moment that collectively broke Caleb Williams here. Right. And now I really feel like, man, your next coach has to be able to fix him. And to take a chance on, Vrabel or whoever picking the right offensive coordinator to temporarily try and fix Caleb Williams is gambling too much with something that's way too important. Like normally I'm on board with just get the best coach regardless, but at some point you reach a point here where it's like, this next coach has to be perfect for Caleb. And again, Mike Vrabel could hire another Arthur Smith or Mike, the Matt LaFleur type of coach, and you could get lucky there, or you could just get Ben Johnson or Joe Brady or whoever you think is the guy who's built in, prepared already to do that.
And I think the Mike Vrabel conversation is, you hired Arthur Smith once. I mean, I know that the Titans aren't the team that you cover, but Matt LaFleur's offense in 2018 was not good. He was the guy playing Dion Lewis over Derrick Henry. You know what I mean? They did not have a good offense in 2018. Matt LaFleur just needed to get out from under Mike Vrabel's thumb so that he could do things the way that he wanted to do. There was conversation about those two clashing quite a bit. So, and who's the better coach? Matt LaFleur is the better coach over Mike Vrabel. And the problem is can Mike Vrabel do it twice? Let's say you strike with an Arthur Smith and Caleb Williams has his best couple of years. Well, that guy who made Caleb Williams look good is just going to get hired away from you. And then can you replace it with another Arthur Smith? Or do you get Todd Downing? Do you get Tim Kelly? Which was ultimately Mike Vrabel's undoing. So I understand your concerns there. I am with you in the sense, or maybe you could correct me that, that's not how you feel. But if I'm the Bears, I'm going out and doing everything I can to get an offensive guy to rehabilitate my quarterback and make sure that my number one asset can get to their highest potential, because a rising tide lifts all boats. So that's how I feel about that. It's how I felt about it for my Titans. I still feel that was the right move, even though they're garbage this year and Brian Callahan might be one and done. Like, there are risks with a Mike Vrabel guy, and I would take the offensive guy to help my quarterback.
Yeah, I think you got that pretty well spot on here. Like, I think some Bears fans could look at it and say, hey, if they got to the point where their offense was good enough, where their offensive coordinator got hired away, they would gladly have that problem. Give us that problem.
Right. I'll take a couple of those.
For 2 years. Let's get to that point first and then deal with that problem later. But it's a good problem.
Yeah, well, it does kind of remind me of like the Chargers getting, Jim Harbaugh this year. He's not some scheme guru, and he didn't even hire a very good offensive coordinator in Greg Roman, but just having like an adult in the room to steer the ship correctly has so much value in the NFL. So it is a worthy debate at the end of the day, and I'm sure that you'll be debating it over there at Locked On Bears. But one thing that I am not willing to debate is I don't trust the Atlanta Falcons, and I don't want them in the playoffs. And we're going to talk about that game right now. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the College Football Playoff on TNT. Look, it's that time of year, folks. The College Football Playoff is back, and it is better than ever. With the newly expanded 12-team format, it is guaranteed to be bigger and, again, better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports' coverage of the College Football Playoff begins on December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff Kickoff Show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup between the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then you're going to get Clemson Tigers looking to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Make sure that you watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. All right, Lauren, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. Talked about the Patrick Mahomes injury, talked about the Vikings and the Bears game. Now we want to move to that other Monday Night Football game that happened, which I don't know why we needed 2 Monday Night Football games this week. Very random thing to have. I guess all 32 teams are playing, so they feel like they can get a little bit more bang for their buck. Sure, whatever. And the Falcons win. But even my guy, Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons, will tell you that this was not the most inspiring victory of all time.
Falcons play it safe and almost blow it in a 15-9 win over the Raiders on Monday Night Football. I'm Aaron Freeman with Locked On Falcons. Why didn't the NFL flex this game off of Monday night? We'll never know. But in a super conservative, ugly performance from the Falcons, they win it. Special teams defense did their job, but the offense left a lot to be desired. Kirk Cousins broke his 4-game streak without a touchdown, tossing a 30-yard pass to Drake London in the first quarter, but then threw a pick on the first pass of the third quarter. The run game looked fine, and the Falcons break their losing streak. That's what matters. But if you were looking for a performance that would inspire confidence that this team is going to run the table and keep their diminishing playoff hopes alive, this was not the game for you. For more coverage of the Atlanta Falcons taking a dump on our hopes and dreams, make sure you follow Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I mean, that about says it all right there. But go ahead.
They won. Like, wait a minute. Didn't they win?
Yeah, they did win. But I got to be honest. I don't blame Aaron for feeling that way. Watching that game, 15-9 over the Raiders, like they did not play well. The Falcons have not played well for 6-7 weeks in a row now. Like they have moved to 7-7. They're 1 game back of Tampa Bay. And here's the thing. They swept the Buccaneers. So they have a major tiebreaker advantage over Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has to find a way to beat them overall record-wise. Not because that's what they need to do as a football team, because, Lauren, I cannot watch this Atlanta Falcons team in the playoffs. They are not good, and not only are they not good, they are not exciting. And for a team that has Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Darnell Mooney, Drake London, Grady Jarrett, Matthew Judon, Justin Simmons, Jesse Bates, AJ Terrell, like, why is this team so boring to watch, so terrible? I cannot deal with it. They do not deserve it. Please, Baker Mayfield, I am begging you, please make it to the playoffs.
I keep looking at this Falcons team and asking myself, like, what is it that they actually do well? I mean, Bijan Robinson's great. They run the ball well. They stop the run okay, but like, it's weird that like they're 7-7 in the playoff mix and they just don't seem like a good football team in very many aspects. But like, I didn't even realize Kirk Cousins leads the NFL in interceptions right now. Like, he's really not playing well, but they have the Giants and the Panthers as 2 of their last 3 games, so that they could easily sleep their way to 9 wins and a tiebreaker and into the playoffs and just get demolished in the first round.
100%. I think that's what it's been like all year long, that they just kind of sleepwalk their way. I mean, they're 13th in the NFL, 120 rushing yards per game. I wouldn't even say that they're a good run game. They're a league average, they're right there in the middle of the league, I guess. So it's like, yeah, what do they do well? We know that their pass rush is absolutely terrible. And like Kirk Cousins, they're even talking after the game. They're asking Raheem Morris, and he's like, he's got to play better. We got to find ways to make him play better. Like, it's just so clear that they were going to win this game because the Raiders are a disaster. But Kirk Cousins is playing awful football, and they have serious quarterback questions to answer this offseason. I have a hard time believing that year 2 Michael Penix isn't going to be a better football player than whatever Kirk Cousins is next year. Like, there's no way that that's true.
Yeah, you got to feel like if you're saying you need your 36-year-old quarterback to play better and that we need to find ways to, like, get more out of this guy, like, wasn't the whole point of giving him the 4-year, $180 million contract that, like, that spot's good, everything else can kind of follow suit now? Like, this feels like almost a little bit Aaron Rodgers in New York, like, just where it's like, this was supposed to be the solution, and you're part of the problem, if not just the only thing holding the team back, but one of the things holding the team back. And it's like borderline disastrous if this doesn't at least, get them into the playoffs.
And look, at the end of the day, they try to act like they pulled wisdom out of the jaws of foolishness, but they didn't. Like, there is no way to slice it. Either you're idiots for paying Kirk Cousins that much money, or you're idiots for drafting Michael Penix that high when you could have drafted Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, someone to actually help your football team that's trying to win right now that can't get to the quarterback at all. Like, there is no way that that's going to come out of the wash and be a wise way to play it for the Falcons. There's just no way. The Raiders side of things, man, like, they're just a terrible football team, and they are getting what they deserve. I said it since the offseason. You go into a season with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell as your quarterbacks, you deserve failure. That's what you deserve. And they'll probably luck themselves in to Shedeur Sanders, but I don't even know if that's all that much of a reward for the losing at the end of the day. I don't know about this quarterback class. So I just think the Raiders are in hell, and I honestly don't believe in Antonio Pierce. And I think that if they do get the number 1 overall pick, they should hire Deion Sanders and draft Shedeur and just see where that takes them. At least they'll be excited.
Yeah, I was hoping we could get some excitement from the Desmond Ridder revenge game, and certainly he threw the ball a lot and wasn't, god awful. It wasn't,
right,
but not, he had more passing yards than Kirk Cousins. He did. Passer rating was pretty close too, but no, I feel for Raiders fans where it's like, okay, at least can you see some of your young guys, Brock Bowers and, even Jackson Powers Johnson on the offensive line, and they got a couple young guys in the defense. Like, can they at least develop and bring something along, give you some hope that, like, okay, maybe you can start to build up a young foundation at some key spots for a quarterback to land in, maybe with a better coach. But in the meantime, you're just taking your lumps and eating it every week.
Yeah, well, I think Tom Telesco is actually an okay GM. He did assemble quite a bit of talent in Los Angeles with the Chargers. His problem was he just couldn't pick the right coach to lead the players that he put together. And it looks like he's having that problem once again. But as for building a foundation, a good roster, they might be able to do some of those things. And they're probably going to get a top 2 pick this year, because without Max Crosby and with Desmond Ridder at QB, I just do not see them winning another game this year, although they play Jacksonville this week. And I'm very interested in that game as a Titans fan. But with that being said, I might be the only man on this planet who's interested in that game. That's going to do it for us today here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Make sure that you check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. That's going to do it for me, your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, with my co-host every Tuesday, Lauren Cox. And as we tell you every single episode, stay safe out there.